Hello, everybody. This is another episode of MSP Rebooted. If I was starting over again, what would I do? What would I do differently than I did before? All those kinds of things. Now, today we're talking about something that isn't super sexy, but it's really, really important. Insurance. Insurance is one of those things that you just need to have. It's a peace of mind, lets you sleep at night. So, with me is my favorite insurance person, Jake. Do a quick introduction, a little bit about who you are, what firm you're with, and then we'll get into some conversation around insurance.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Adam. Great to talk again. As Adam said, my name is Jake Charen. I'm Jake with Lakeside Insurance in Denver, Colorado, not State Farm, even though you may be thinking that when you hear the name. Lakeside's a private insurance agency. We work with small to mid-sized businesses, and we like to partner with companies as more of an outsourced risk manager. We've been doing this since 1999, so we've been doing it for a good while now, and really finding like-minded people that want to focus on risk management, understand that insurance is a cost that a business needs to take in, but not always having to utilize it to report claims because there's things we can do on the front end to kind of mitigate those things from happening. Again, human error is always going to cause issues, and that's why we have insurance at the end of the day to kind of be that last line of defense, but it really is figuring out what can we do to set ourselves up as an MSP, as a small business to protect ourselves and have that insurance just in case something goes wrong.
Awesome. So let's say I am a brand new MSP and I call you and I say, Jake, what insurance do I need? I don't have any clients yet, but I have a friend of mine that wants to hire me as early as like next week. What do I need to do? What insurance do I need to have as I'm getting going?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I have this conversation with a lot of MSPs. And the first thing I talk to them about, which encompasses the insurance, is actually what does their master service agreement look like? Or what does that contract look like that they put in place with their client? So what I'm doing is bringing up that contract because what is in the details of that MSA or master service agreement is the scope of work that you're promising. So if I'm working with Lakeside Insurance as an MSP, I'm promising that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z thing for you. Well, it needs to be in writing. And then a part of that too is requiring that your client carries their own insurance. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but to start, putting that master service agreement in place. And then off of that, we're going to put what I would call professional liability and cyber insurance, or tech E&O and cyber is what you kind of hear all the time. That's going to get you started. The technology errors and omission portion is going to cover any sort of error or omission from that scope of work that you promised Lakeside Insurance you were going to do, just in case there's an issue with any of those things. Let's say that you missed a patching update and now we have a breach, or you said that you were going to always be updating our employees' passwords and making sure that everyone's doing that. We didn't do that. Now we had a potential breach off of that. That's where that errors and omission side is going to protect you. The cyber insurance component of that is if, as an MSP, you actually have a breach yourself. So let's say that someone's coming after all the data that you have for all your clients. They want to compromise your email, maybe send some phishing things out. That policy is all in one. So it's that technologies, errors and omission / cyber insurance. That's the first thing I always recommend to businesses.
All right. So then I guess what happens if I have an office space, or maybe I'm renting like a space at a WeWork, or maybe like a solo person office someplace? Do I need an insurance for that?
Yep, you're exactly correct. That's where I was going to jump into next is that general liability. It's the thing that everyone talks about. We always hear it's general liability. Well, what does that even exactly mean? So general liability is going to cover you for property damage or bodily injury that happens to anyone that comes onto your site. So as an MSP, if you have an office space, whether someone's out in the parking lot and they slip and fall, or they come inside and they get injured, you're going to need coverage for that. What a lot of people don't know about general liability insurance and where it can cover you is, let's say that you're an MSP, Adam, and you work from home, which you do work from home. Mm-hmm. You're going out to all your different clients and you're meeting with them in person. You go out to their site, you help set up laptops, you're doing different things. People don't really have servers on site anymore, so you're not really doing that kind of work. But if they do, let's say you're setting some things up or you're setting up a new computer. Well, I leave a cord down as I'm setting some things up. Someone in the office doesn't see it because it's not typically there. They trip and fall, and now they hit their head and get injured. That's actually going to come back on the MSP's general liability insurance. So it doesn't just cover you at the place in which you inhabit, but as you go out into the field and somebody were to get injured because of something that you put down, then that's where that general liability policy is going to kick in. And these are very expensive policies to get started. Everyone thinks insurance is crazy expensive and it's so just outlandish. But a general liability policy for a startup managed service provider is probably about $500 annually. Where that
Okay.
tech E&O and cyber, that can get a little bit more expensive as your starting cost, but you can get kind of a pretty good policy through us or through another provider for anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 for the year.
So the thought about going into the field brought up another thing too, right? So if I'm driving to client sites, especially since I'm a solopreneur, I'm doing the thing myself, I'm working from home, so all the work I need to do is going to be in the field at my client offices.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need different auto insurance, or is there something I should do there as well?
Absolutely. So, as you're getting started up, you may not know, is this business going to survive? I hope that it does. But let's say that right now we're just getting started up and that vehicle is titled in your personal name. So, you need to have personal insurance on your vehicle just in case any sort of injury were to happen or bodily injury or property damage to somebody else. But let's say that you also want to put it on your general liability policy. It's what's called hired and non owned auto. So it's not a true auto policy, but let's say that you get injured as the owner in some sort of a car accident, it's going to cover liability around that. So to get started, a personal insurance policy for auto, and then adding the hired and non owned auto to your general liability. As you grow and expand, I always recommend that business owners try to move the title of their vehicle into the business's name. However, it's titled, if it's in your personal name, personal insurance. If we title it in the business name, now we can get auto business insurance. So
Okay.
hopefully that's kind of what you're looking for around that. It does get a little confusing because, yeah, as an at home MSP, you're going to be out in the field all day. So it is figuring out how do I want to potentially mitigate from someone coming after me personally? And that is to put it in the business's name. Because if I'm operating for work and I get into an accident, they can not only come after me personally, but they could also list my business in there. Where if it's just a business vehicle, I'd rather you just go after my business, not because I want to lose my business, but I have a lot more personal assets right now than I do in my startup.
Right. And this is underscores the need of having somebody like you, whether it's you or somebody else like you,
Mm-hmm.
to help understand the risk of all things, right? Because if you think about MSPs are all about reducing risk for their clients. Well,
Always.
we're all about reducing risk for you as the MSP owner because it's really important. So if I'm starting a brand new, I'm going to have a general liability policy. I'm going to have tech, with cyber and the auto provision that you just mentioned. If I have those three things and I'm just a solo person, I don't have any employees, am I pretty well covered at that point?
Absolutely. And the key to that is having those policies and then also that master service agreement. So working with an attorney to understand what that looks like because you can set the limits of liability that you're requesting a client has because you want them to have cyber insurance too.
Hmm.
That's where a lot of conversations come up and where there is kind of this symbiotic relationship between insurance agents and MSPs is that as an MSP, you want your client to have cyber insurance, but they need to have a strong policy because most breaches that happen are an endpoint user. You can try
Right.
to do everything you are doing as an MSP and you have them locked up everywhere. But if someone's not taking care of their email or if somebody's doing something on a site that they shouldn't be viewing, it's going to end up being a breach because of that endpoint user. And so their policy needs to respond and react in that situation.
Fantastic. Now, what happens if I don't have an MSA, right? So let's say I'm a brand new MSP. I'm flying without a net without having an MSA and contracts. And I come to you. Do you help me with an MSA or do you say, time out, go get this someplace else? So how does that work?
Yeah, so I have that general conversation with a lot of people all the time, and we can help you get started, but in no means am I an attorney. I read contracts every day for my clients, lease agreements, subcontractor agreements, scope of work, things like that. So we can help you get started. I have sample MSAs and sample subcontractor agreements that people have shared with me, attorneys, but we can get you probably 80% of the way there. And then it is going to an attorney and saying, okay, let's tighten this up for my company. Let's make sure that everything in there is what I need. And obviously the scope of work is going to change. But when you come to a client with something like that, they know that you mean business because it's
Right.
not just a regular contract. It's, oh, this person really wants to protect themselves and their business for the long haul.
Yeah, and if you're looking for help with an MSA, I absolutely have some people I recommend. I'll put their names and contact information in the description of this video,
Right.
and on blog posts on my website as well, just to make sure make that easy for you as possible. It is going to cost you a couple grand to do that. It's going to cost you a couple more grand in insurance, but for the most part, MSP space is not terribly expensive to start something brand new, presuming you have enough money to live on yourself, right? But these startup costs is really kind of the MSA side of the world, the insurance side of the world, maybe a little bit of tooling, but then you're able to kind of get up and running. So let's say I'm maybe a year in, and I've got a few clients, and I need to hire an employee. When I get ready to hire an employee, what additional insurance do I need to consider as it relates to that?
Yeah, absolutely. As you start growing and you want to bring employees on, the first thing is going to be that workers' compensation insurance. So the workers' compensation covers any sort of injury that happens to an employee while they're performing jobs. So if they're going out to a client site and they get into that car accident and they get hurt, it's going to have coverage there. Let's say that they slip and fall in the office and anything happens to them there and they get injured during their workday, that's where we're going to have coverage. And as an owner, you don't have to carry workers' compensation for yourself. So that's kind of the big thing that comes up. You can absolutely add yourself to the policy, and it's not very expensive. But once you bring that first employee on, you are required by law to carry workers' compensation insurance. And if you don't carry it, and let's say that that employee does get injured, you're going to be facing serious fines with the Department of Labor in whatever state that you live in, and you're going to end up having to pay a lot of fines, like I said. So workers' compensation is kind of that first thing once you get that employee in the door. But let's talk about when you have 10 employees, 15 employees, and now there's some water cooler talk or people are sending things on Teams messages or saying things back and forth. We have a little bit more of an uncontrolled environment now. At first it was just Jake, then I hired Adam. Now it's just Jake and Adam and we've got really good rapport. But now I have more employees that who knows how they interact with each other. That employment practices liability policy is the next thing that I would look to put in place as an MSP. What that is going to cover and protect you from is any sort of wrongful terminations, hiring or firing issues, anything that goes on between the walls of employees from a first party standpoint. Employees aren't treating each other fairly, someone's rude to somebody, they don't want to work with them because of their age, gender, race, they want to come after the company because I've come to you so many times, Jake. I've told you as the owner that I don't feel comfortable in this workplace and you haven't done anything. Well, now I'm going to sue you. And that's where that employment practices liability is going to cover defense costs and a payout. But what most people don't know is that there's also third party coverage that's included within that policy. So what that third party coverage is for is if as an employee, I mistreat a client of ours or just a random person out on the street. So maybe I go in person and I really don't like working with these guys because they don't treat me well. And I keep telling the owner, Jake, I don't like going to that construction company. I don't like that manufacturing firm. I don't like that architect, whatever the business may be. It doesn't matter. But it's your duty as the owner to say, okay, we need to either bring a new person in to go work with them, or we need to have a conversation with this client. And it might not come back on your insurance, but we may end up going and suing that client. So employment practices liability is kind of that next phase as you really continue to grow. And these claims are tedious. They're expensive. And having someone in your court for the defense side of the house is exactly what you need.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple different MSPs that have been dealing with wrongful termination situations, and that is at the very best, it's distracting. Even if you have the practices liability insurance in place, you still get involved a little bit, and that's even distracting. But it's even worse if like your company is going to be, potentially directly liable for longer term, severance or whatever the payout's going to look like. And yeah, that can be hugely beneficial to you, especially as you grow. Because to your point, Jake, when companies are less controlled because for whatever reason, right, you get a little bigger, you can't keep your eye on all the things.
No.
And this helps you sleep at night, right? Insurance, that's what insurance is for. It's to help you sleep at night. It's not for you to go and report everything and try and get these little micro payouts. It's to really help you understand and minimize that big catastrophic thing that always feels like it's looming behind every corner. But that's the important part. So any final thoughts as it relates to that? I'm just getting going. I'm getting up off the ground. Any other final insurance conversations that we should consider as it relates to this early part if you're rebooting an MSP?
I think that just the overall thing that we've spoken about today that's important for an MSP is find trusted partners. As an MSP, you are that trusted partner for a small business for cybersecurity, but you're not the person that's going to do their accounting. You need a good CPA. You're not the person that's going to help with the subcontractor or MSA agreements. that's an attorney. Or as you're dealing with these employment issues, are you partnering with an HR person? And then, of course, are you partnering with a good insurance person that's bringing these conversations up? They're not fun conversations by any means because it's kind of things that we just, cover our eyes a little bit and say,
Right.
well, it couldn't happen to me. I'm too small. But I don't want you to be that case study. I don't want you to be the reason why we read about something that happened to an MSP because, oh, they didn't have an employee handbook and it wasn't updated each year. And now they're facing fines and violations because of their state or federal law. So, I think overall, it's just have awareness, have people that you can trust in your court, such as Adam or myself, and there's resources out there. I mean, again, like you said, you've got plenty of people that you work with that can help with the MSAs. That's fantastic. And it's always better to work with someone from a referral standpoint. So you're definitely not alone as an MSP as you're starting up. We're seeing this pop up all over, but take the steps on the front end because if you think all these things are expensive, imagine how much that claim is going to cost if you don't have the insurance for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that whole thing is important, right? And you also don't want to be a subject of one of my videos in the future about an
Right.
MSP that could have done better, right? Our world is difficult enough. Let's not make your life a little bit more difficult by not having the right coverage. And this is one of those situations where an ounce of prevention is worth pounds of payment on the back end. So, Jake, thanks for sharing your guidance and your expertise around this. And I really appreciate you just kind of being here and helping educate the industry.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Thanks for having me on. Happy to educate anyone. And that's what it's for. You don't have to work with me. You don't have to work with Adam, but we do want to at least get you in the right position so that you can protect your business and have a very successful life.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on this ramble with us. We'll hope to see you on the next one.